The call came on a Thursday evening in October, while I was finishing a briefing document that could not leave my desk and would not be read by anyone whose name I was permitted to say. I almost didn't answer. My sister's calls had a particular rhythm to them, warm for the first 30 seconds, transactional for the next 2 minutes, closing with something she needed. I had learned to brace for the third part. But she was getting married in 2 weeks and I had her gift already wrapped on my kitchen counter and I answered. Claire. Her voice was careful. Careful in a way that meant she had rehearsed this. Hey Megan. I need to talk to you about the wedding. I put down my pen. Okay. It's just a pause. James's work people are going to be there. His colleagues, his VP, his CEO. It's a networking thing as much as it's a celebration, you know how these things go. And James is worried, we're both worried, that having someone from a federal agency there with your clearance level and everything is going to make people uncomfortable. Like they won't know what they can or can't say around you. It puts a weird energy in the room. I sat with that for a moment. You want me not to come to your wedding, I said. I want you to understand that it's not personal. Megan, you want me not to come to your wedding. A longer pause. Just the reception. You could come to the ceremony. Actually, the ceremony might be better without. We're keeping that very small. Is Mom there with you right now? Silence. Put her on speaker or don't, I said. But I know she's there. A rustling sound and then my mother's voice, soft and placating in the particular way that had always made me feel more alone. Honey, she's just asking you to be understanding. This is her day. James has a very important position and his company. I know what James's company does, Mom. Then you understand. I looked at the briefing document on my desk. At the federal seal on the letterhead. At the 7 years of work that had produced the clearance level that was, apparently, an awkward energy for a wedding reception in a hotel ballroom in suburban Maryland. I understand, I said. And I hung up. My name is Claire Hayes. I am 38 years old and I am a senior director at a federal infrastructure security agency, a position I will not name and a specific role I will not describe in any detail that matters. What I can tell you is that I have held a top secret/say.I clearance for 11 years. I have testified before 2 Senate subcommittees. I have worked on infrastructure protection projects whose existence I am not authorized to confirm or deny, and I have done this work because I believe, with the uncomplicated conviction of someone who came to it young and never left, that it matters. None of this is what my family sees when they look at me. What my family sees is a woman who works for the government, which in the geography of our particular family meant something specific and not entirely flattering. My father spent 20 years as an electrician and retired with a permanent suspicion of bureaucrats. My mother managed a dental office and had a talent for social calibration, knowing whose status mattered and how to position herself relative to it, that she had passed on to my sister with precision and to me not at all. Megan is 3 years younger than me. She has my mother's instinct for rooms, for reading who matters and arranging herself accordingly, and she had always been, in a way I understood without resenting too deeply, the daughter my mother had expected to have. Pretty in an unambiguous way. Socially fluent. Interested in the right things, which in our family meant things that were legible to other people. Megan's life made sense from the outside. Mine had always required explanation, and our family had never been patient with explanation. James the First had met 4 times. He was in corporate finance, VP of something at a mid-size investment firm, pleasant in the surface way of men who have been trained to be pleasant and have mistaken the training for a personality. He had shaken my hand at Thanksgiving the previous year and asked with genuine curiosity what I actually did all day, and when I had given my standard answer, federal infrastructure work, policy and oversight, mostly desk work, he had nodded and immediately turned to talk to my father about football. I had not minded. I had minded the thing underneath it, the assumption embedded in the question, which was that whatever I did all day was something that required translation into terms he could evaluate, and if it didn't translate cleanly, it ranked below the conversation about football. That was James. And Megan had chosen him, which was her right, and I had accepted him, which was mine, and none of that was the wound. The wound was my mother's voice. Just let her have her day. The wound was the rehearsed quality of Megan's call. The sense that they had sat together and worked out the approach and decided it would land softly enough that I would agree and no one would have to feel anything difficult. The wound was being correct about that calculation because I had agreed and they had felt nothing, and I was alone in my apartment with a wrapped gift on my kitchen counter and a briefing document I couldn't discuss with anyone. I called my colleague and closest friend, Rosaria Vance, at 9 p.m. Rosaria had been at the agency longer than I had. She had watched me come up through the ranks and had been, in the plainest sense, the person I trusted most in a professional life where trust was both essential and complicated. She uninvited me, I said. Pause. From the wedding. Reception. I can come to the ceremony. Except she's keeping that small. Claire. I know. What did you say? I said I understood. Rosaria was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? I looked at the wrapped gift. I had spent 3 weeks finding it a first edition of a book Megan had mentioned once 2 years ago, in a conversation I had apparently been paying more attention to than she had expected. It was a good gift. It was the kind of gift you gave someone when you loved them and had been listening. I'm going to the reception, I said. Claire. She said I could come to the ceremony. She just asked me not to come to the reception. I paused. She didn't ask me not to come to the ceremony. Rosaria made a sound that was not quite a laugh. That is technically true. I'm going to the ceremony. And then I'm going to see what happens. You know something is going to happen. I know something might happen, I said. I'm not engineering it. You never do, Rosaria said. That's what makes it interesting. The thing about my job that people consistently misunderstand, my family included, always, is that it is not dramatic. I know what the word clearance does to people's imaginations. I know the assumptions it generates, the action movie framework it activates, the questions people don't ask because they've already filled in the answers with something more interesting than the truth. The truth is that my work is largely analytical. I sit at a desk. I read documents. I write assessments. I attend meetings where the stakes are real and the conversations are careful and the outcomes matter in ways that will never be publicly attributed. It is important work. It is not glamorous work. It requires a particular temperament, patient, precise, comfortable with ambiguity, capable of holding significant things quietly for long periods without needing them acknowledged. My family had always read this temperament as blankness, as absence. My mother once told a relative that Claire is just very private, in a tone that communicated and we're not sure why. Megan had, for most of our adult lives, treated my quietness as a mild personal failing, something I might eventually grow out of. I had not grown out of it. I had grown into it. And along the way I had become, without announcing it, someone whose name was occasionally said in rooms I was not in, by people with the authority to matter. The week of the wedding, my agency's director, a man named Calloway who had run 3 different departments over a 20-year career and was the most politically intelligent person I had ever worked for, stopped by my office doorway. You're going to the Infrastructure Security Summit next month, he said. It was not a question. Yes, sir. You'll be on the panel with the deputy secretary. I know. He looked at me for a moment with the measuring look he used when he was deciding something. Hayes, he said, I've put your name forward for the director-level appointment. The committee meets in January. I did not say anything for a moment. Director level was 2 steps from where I stood. It was, in the architecture of my agency, the kind of appointment that did not get reversed. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me. It's your record. He paused in the doorway. You have a wedding this weekend? My sister's, yes. Enjoy it, he said and walked away. I sat for a moment with the particular quality of that afternoon. The document on my desk. The title in my future. My sister's wedding 3 days away, to which I had been asked not to come, and to which I was coming anyway because the ceremony was still technically open, and because I had decided that I was done making myself smaller to fit spaces that other people had measured for me. I was done with that. I had been done with it for some time. I just hadn't found the moment to say so clearly enough to be heard. The ceremony was at 2 o'clock at a small Episcopal church 20 minutes from where we had grown up. I sat in the 3rd row. My mother saw me when she came in and her expression went through 4 things in rapid succession. Surprise, calculation, a flash of something that might have been guilt, and then a settled, careful smile that communicated we will discuss this later. I smiled back. I had worn my navy dress, the one I kept for professional occasions that required formality, and my agency lapel pin which I wore the way I wore my credentials, quietly, without comment, without apology. Megan came down the aisle on my father's arm, and she was genuinely beautiful in the way that people are beautiful at weddings, which is partly the dress and the flowers and the light and partly something else, something about the moment itself. She did not look at me until she was halfway down the aisle. Then she did look, and I held her gaze for 2 seconds, calm and steady, and she looked away first. The ceremony was 35 minutes. I cried a little, which surprised me and then didn't surprise me. I had always loved Megan. That was never the complicated part. The reception was at the Harrington, a hotel ballroom I had been to once before years earlier for a conference. It had high ceilings and very good acoustics and the kind of gold chandelier lighting that made everyone look like a painting of themselves. I had not been invited. I was there anyway because after the ceremony I had simply followed the procession of cars to the hotel, parked, walked into the lobby, given my name at the desk, Hayes +1 to the Hayes family on the family side, and been shown to table 1, which was where the family table was, which was where I would have been seated if I had been invited, which I had not been, and yet here I was. The maitre d' had not questioned it. Why would he? I was on the list. Megan had not removed me from the list because Megan had not thought to remove me from the list, because Megan had asked me politely not to come and assumed I would comply, because I had spent 38 years complying and she had no reason to expect anything different. I ordered water. I straightened my lapel pin. I watched the room fill. James saw me from across the ballroom when he came in with the wedding party. I watched his face do the same 4-step sequence my mother's had done in the church, but faster and with more alarm at the end. He said something to the man beside him, one of the groomsmen, and the groomsman looked at me and they had a brief conversation, and then James looked away and I saw him make the calculation. Scene now or hope, it doesn't matter. He chose hope. My mother found me during the cocktail hour. Claire. Her voice was very quiet. You said you understood. I understood what you asked, I said. I came to the ceremony. I'm at the family table. I haven't spoken to James or interfered with anything. That's not. Mom. I said it the way I said things at work when a conversation needed to move forward rather than sideways. I'm going to sit here and have dinner and be happy for my sister. That's all I'm doing. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she sat down. Megan came over 10 minutes later. Her jaw was set in the way it had been set since we were children when she was trying not to show that something had rattled her. You said you wouldn't come, she said. I said I understood. I came to the ceremony. You didn't specify the ceremony. Claire. Megan. I looked at her directly. I am your sister. I am at your wedding. I am sitting quietly and I am not making anything about me. If that's a problem, tell me now and I will leave. But I wanted to be here. So I'm here. She looked at me for a long moment and I saw something move through her face. Something past the calculation and the social management, something older and less polished. For just a moment she looked the way she had looked at 15, when she was scared of something and hadn't worked out yet how to dress it in composure. Then it passed. He straightened. Don't do anything, she said. I won't do anything, I said. I never do anything. You know that. He went back to James. The toasts began at 7:30. There were 4 of them. The best man, Megan's college roommate, my father, who was brief and genuine and made Megan cry, and then a man I recognized from the corporate table who stood with the ease of someone accustomed to rooms listening to him. Richard Calloway wasn't there. My director was not at this wedding. I want to be clear about that because what happened next was not something I arranged or anticipated or in any way engineered. The man at the microphone was Edward Marsh. He was the CEO of James's firm, and I had met him once 14 months earlier at an infrastructure security summit where he had been on an industry panel and I had been the federal moderator. We had spoken for 11 minutes during a coffee break. He had been sharp, genuinely curious, the kind of private sector executive who took the government side of infrastructure more seriously than most of his peers. I had given him my card. He had emailed me twice afterward with follow-up questions about regulatory frameworks. I had answered. I had not thought about him since. He stood at the microphone and gave a toast that was warm and personal in the way of a man who genuinely liked James, and then he raised his glass and then he was about to close and instead he paused. He looked across the ballroom. He looked at table 1. He looked at the lapel pin. Before I sit down, he said in a voice that carried easily across the room's good acoustics, I have to ask, is that Director Hayes at table 1? Claire Hayes from the federal side. Every head at the corporate table turned. James, who was at the head table 10 feet to my left, turned pale in a way that was visible from where I sat. I raised my hand slightly. "Mr. Marsh." He pointed at me with the hand holding the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if James's family knows this, but that woman right there is one of the most respected infrastructure security voices in federal government. I sat on a panel she ran 14 months ago, and I have been thinking about her regulatory framework analysis ever since." He looked at James. "James, how do you know Director Hayes?" James opened his mouth. Closed it. "She's my wife's sister," he said. A beat. Edward Marsh looked at Megan. Looked at me. Looked back at James. "Your sister-in-law," he said slowly, "is Director Claire Hayes." "Yes," James said. "The same Director Hayes whose name is on the pending infrastructure security framework that my legal team has been reviewing for the last 3 months." The corporate table was very still. James said. "Yes." Marsh looked at me again. There was something in his expression that was not unkind. He was a smart man, and he was reading the room, and he was beginning to understand that he had stepped into something. But he was also, I could see, genuinely unable to stop himself from saying what he was thinking, because it was the kind of man he was. "Well," he said into the microphone. "Congratulations to the happy couple. And James," he raised his glass, "you might want to invest in that relationship." He sat down. The corporate table erupted in murmuring. James's VP leaned over to him immediately. Megan at the head table was looking at her plate. My mother beside me had stopped breathing. I lifted my water glass and drank. The hour after the toast was its own kind of theater, and I watched it with the detachment of someone who had learned, over many years, to observe rather than perform. James's colleagues came to the table. Not all of them, 3 in the course of the evening, with the careful casualness of people who wanted to make contact without appearing to want to. His VP, a woman named Sandra who introduced herself with the energy of someone recalculating a position, shook my hand and said she had read the framework document and had questions. I said she was welcome to reach out through the agency. One of the junior associates, a young man who couldn't have been more than 26, came over near the end of the night, clearly emboldened by 2 glasses of wine, and said, "Can I ask what it's actually like? Working in federal infrastructure security." I looked at him. I thought about my mother saying just let her have her day. I thought about your job makes my guests uncomfortable. I thought about 7 years of building something in the quiet that my family had read as emptiness. "It's desk work mostly," I said. "A lot of reading. A lot of careful thinking." He nodded, clearly wanting more. "But it matters," I said. "The things we protect. Most people don't think about them until they're gone. I think about them every day." I paused. "That's enough for me." He nodded again, more slowly this time, and I thought I saw something genuine settle in his face. I was not performing any of this. I never performed. That was, I understood, both my greatest professional asset and the thing that had always made me legible to my family as a kind of absence. People who perform can be read. People who simply require more patience than my family had generally been willing to extend. Megan found me near the coat check at the end of the night. The guests were thinning. James was across the room talking to Marsh and his VP with the bright, effortful energy of a man doing urgent repair work. My parents had left 20 minutes earlier. My father with a long hug, my mother with a kiss on my cheek and the same careful smile she had worn all night, the one that covered the conversation we would eventually have to have. Megan was still in her dress, her veil gone, her makeup less perfect than it had been at 6. She looked tired in the way brides look tired at the end of their wedding nights, which is a specific kind of tired that has joy and relief and something more complicated folded into it. "Claire," she said. "You were beautiful today," I said. "The ceremony was genuinely lovely." She looked at me for a moment. "You knew he'd be here." "I didn't know anything," I said. "I knew I was your sister and I wanted to be at your wedding." "You knew something would." "Megan." I said her name quietly. I sat at a table and drank water. I didn't make a speech. I didn't introduce myself to anyone. Whatever happened happened because of what I am, not because of what I did. Those are different things. She was quiet for a moment. Her hands were clasped in front of her and I recognized the gesture. She had done it since childhood when she was trying to hold something in that wanted to come out. "Why didn't you tell me," she said finally, "what you actually do? How important it is?" I looked at her for a long time. "Megan," I said, You called me 2 weeks before your wedding to ask me not to come because my job made your guests uncomfortable. You asked Mom first before you called me. You rehearsed it. I paused. When exactly would I have told you? What version of telling you would have been heard? Her jaw tightened. But she didn't argue. I'm not angry with you, I said. And I meant it, or I meant the version of it that was true right then, which was that the anger had been there for years and had burned down to something more like grief. But I am tired. I have been explaining myself to this family for a long time and the explanation never lands the way it needs to, and at some point you stop explaining. I didn't know, she said. No, I said. You didn't ask. We stood there for a moment, two women in the same coat check line at the end of a long night, and the chandelier light had gone amber and low and the room was nearly empty and we were both, I think, aware that something had shifted and would not shift back. I want to know, she said. I know it hasn't been fair. But I want to know. If you'll tell me. I picked up my coat. I held it for a moment. There are things I can't tell you, I said. That's just the job. But the things I can tell you, yes. I'll tell you. She nodded. She was not crying, which surprised me because Megan cried easily and had cried twice already tonight. I thought it meant something that she wasn't crying now. I wasn't sure what. Congratulations, I said. On the marriage. I mean that. I know you do, she said. I put on my coat and walked out through the lobby and into the cool October air. The valley brought my car. I sat in it for a moment before driving, windows down, listening to the sound of the city settling into night. I did not feel triumphant. I want to be precise about this because the feeling is important and easily misread. What I felt was the particular weight of a thing that had been held in for a long time and had finally been set down. Not resolved, not healed, just down on the ground, no longer mine to carry alone. And underneath that, something smaller and more stubborn, which was grief. For the years of dinners where my mother had looked past me. For James's face when Marsh said my name and what that face told me about what he had assumed and for how long he had assumed it. For my sister in the coat check line asking why didn't you tell me, not yet understanding that the telling and the hearing are two separate acts and only one of them had ever been mine to control. I drove home. The city was quiet. My apartment was the way I had left it. A half-finished briefing document on the desk, a first-edition book still wrapped on the counter, a lapel pin I had set in the ceramic dish by the door and would put on again on Monday morning. I made tea. I sat at my desk. I did not open the briefing document. I thought about Rosaria, who I would call tomorrow and who would say I told you something would happen, and who I would not correct even though what happened was not something I had told. It was something that had simply become impossible to contain. I thought about Megan in her wedding dress in the coat check line asking to be told. I thought about the question beneath the question. When did you stop trusting me with it? The honest answer was, slowly and then all at once, and at a particular Tuesday evening when she was 24 and I had mentioned the clearance exam for the first time and she had said without cruelty, without even awareness, that sounds exhausting, why would you want that? And turned back to her phone. I had never mentioned it again. That was the loss. Not the wedding, not the text, not the years of being the sister whose work made guests uncomfortable. The loss was that specific Tuesday 11 years ago, when I had reached toward her with something real and she had not been able to receive it, and we had both moved on, and the distance had grown in the silence where the conversation should have been. The tea went cold. I let it. Some distances once made do not close. They can be acknowledged, mapped, walked beside. But the specific shape of what was lost stays lost. That is not a tragedy. It is just what happens between people who love each other imperfectly over a long time and don't know until too late that the small moments were the ones that mattered. I hoped it wasn't too late. I didn't know yet. That uncertainty, that particular not knowing, was the thing I carried home from my sister's wedding, wrapped in my coat, sitting on the counter beside a gift I still hadn't given her. I would give it to her. Not that night, but soon.